What's the example action for Law 41? Law 41 is avoid stepping into a great man's shoes. This law advises to avoid taking on a leadership role that has been previously held by someone who was highly respected or successful, as it is difficult to live up to the legacy and expectations of that person. Actions that align with this law could include 1. Avoiding taking on a leadership role that has been previously held by someone who was highly respected or successful. 2. Searching for new and lesser-known opportunities instead. 3. Being willing to start small and work one's way up. 4. Being mindful of the challenges and expectations of stepping into someone else's shoes. 5. Being aware of the potential for comparison and judgment. 6. Being prepared to establish one's own reputation and legacy. 7. Being willing to take risks and be a trailblazer rather than following in someone else's footsteps. By avoiding stepping into a great man's shoes, one can avoid the challenges and expectations that come with taking on a leadership role that has been previously held by someone who was highly respected or successful. This approach can help to establish one's own reputation and legacy. It's worth noting that this law isn't about shying away from challenges or opportunities. It's about recognizing the importance of avoiding taking on a leadership role that has been previously held by someone who was highly respected or successful, due to the difficulty of living up to the legacy and expectations. Instead, one should search for new and lesser-known opportunities, be willing to start small and work one's way up, take risks and be a trailblazer rather than following in someone else's footsteps. This way you can establish your own reputation, legacy and goals. Here are some example scenarios for enacting Law 41. 1. In a business setting, a new CEO who avoids trying to replicate the leadership style and strategies of their predecessor, and instead creates their own vision and approach for the company. 2. In a political context, a leader who avoids trying to emulate the policies and actions of a previous, popular leader, and instead creates their own agenda and style of leadership. 3. On a personal level, an individual who avoids trying to replace a close friend or mentor who has recently passed away, and instead seeks to forge their own relationships and connections. Avoiding stepping into a great man's shoes can be a powerful way to avoid comparison and to establish one's own reputation and accomplishments. However, it's important to be aware that learning from someone who was successful can also be a valuable opportunity, and that avoiding it could lead to missing out on some important lessons. Additionally, it's important to be aware that this law could also be seen as a form of disrespect or a lack of appreciation, and that it could also be costly in terms of opportunity. Furthermore, it's important to find a balance between respecting one's predecessor and creating one's own vision and style. What's the example action for Law 42? Law 42 is strike the shepherd and the sheep will scatter. This law advises to target key individuals or leaders in order to weaken and disrupt an organization or group. Actions that align with this law could include 1. Identifying key individuals or leaders within an organization or group. 2. Targeting those individuals in order to weaken or disrupt the organization or group. 3. Taking advantage of any power struggles or internal conflicts that may arise. 4. Using tactics such as manipulation, deception, or blackmail to disrupt the leadership. 5. Being aware of the potential consequences of targeting key individuals or leaders. 6. Being prepared to take control of the group or organization once it has been weakened or disrupted. By targeting key individuals or leaders, one can weaken and disrupt an organization or group, making it vulnerable to takeover. This approach can be a powerful tool to gain control and achieve one's goals. It's worth noting that this law isn't about causing harm or destruction, it's about recognizing the power of targeting key individuals or leaders, and using it as a tool to weaken and disrupt an organization or group. it's important to be aware that this approach can have significant consequences, and it should be used with caution. One should consider the potential consequences of targeting key individuals or leaders before taking any action, and be prepared for any eventualities. And always act ethically and with a moral compass. Here are some example scenarios for enacting Law 42. 1. In a business setting, a competitor who targets and undermines the leadership of a successful company in order to create disarray and weaken the company's position in the market. 2. In a political context, a leader who targets and discredits the leader of a rival political party in order to weaken the party's support and influence. 3. On a personal level, an individual who targets and undermines the leader of a social group in order to weaken the group's cohesion and power dynamics. Strike the shepherd and the sheep will scatter can be a powerful way to weaken and disrupt groups. However, it's important to be aware that this law is often unethical and could have dangerous consequences for the targeted leader and for the group as a whole. Additionally, it's important to be aware that this law could also backfire and lead to unintended consequences, or that it could also be costly in terms of reputation. Furthermore, it's important to consider the long-term effects, and to seek ways to create opportunities in an ethical and legal way. What's the example action for Law 43? Law 43 is work on the hearts and minds of others. This law advises using subtle persuasion and manipulation to influence the thoughts and emotions of others, in order to gain their support and cooperation. Actions that align with this law could include: 1. Using subtle persuasion and manipulation techniques to influence the thoughts and emotions of others. 2. Understanding and playing on the desires, fears, and emotions of others. 3. Using storytelling, imagery, and metaphor to create an emotional connection. 4. Being able to read the body language and nonverbal cues of others. 5. Being able to adapt one's message and approach to different people. 6. Using flattery and charm to gain the trust and cooperation of others. 7. Being able to build rapport and establish a sense of trust. By working on the hearts and minds of others, one can gain their support and cooperation. This approach can help to influence people and achieve one's goals through subtle persuasion and manipulation. It's worth noting that this law isn't about being deceitful or Machiavellian. It's about recognizing the power of subtle persuasion and manipulation, and using it as a tool to influence the thoughts and emotions of others. It's important to be aware that this approach should be used ethically, and the goal should be to persuade others without exploiting or manipulating them. The key is to understand the desires, fears and emotions of others, and adapt one's message accordingly, and always be honest, transparent and build trust. Here are some example scenarios for enacting Law 43. 1. In a business setting, a marketing team that creates emotional advertisements to appeal to consumers' desires, rather than just listing the product's features and benefits. 2. In a political context, a leader who uses emotional rhetoric and storytelling to connect with voters and gain support, rather than just presenting policy plans and facts. 3. On a personal level, an individual who uses emotional appeal and charisma to build strong relationships and to gain the trust and support of others. Working on the hearts and minds of others can be a powerful way to influence and persuade others. However, it's important to be aware that this law could also be used in unethical ways to manipulate others, or that it could also be costly in terms of authenticity and credibility. Furthermore, it's important to keep in mind that facts and logical arguments are also important, and that it's important to find a balance between emotional and logical appeals when communicating. What's the example action for Law 44? Law 44 is disarm and infuriate with the mirror effect. This law advises to reflect back the negative behavior of others, in order to disarm them and make them feel ashamed of their actions. Actions that align with this law could include 1. Reflecting back the negative behavior of others in a calm and non-judgmental manner. 2. Holding a mirror up to their actions to make them aware of the impact of their behavior. 3. Using irony, sarcasm, or humor to disarm the situation. 4. Being able to respond in a calm and composed manner. 5. Being able to diffuse a hostile or aggressive situation. 6. Being able to create an emotional connection and make the person feel understood. 7. Being able to make the person feel ashamed of their behavior and induce them to change. By using the mirror effect, one can disarm and infuriate others by reflecting back their negative behavior, making them aware of the impact of their actions. This approach can help to diffuse hostile or aggressive situations, and create an emotional connection to help them change their behavior. It's worth noting that this law isn't about being confrontational or retaliating. It's about recognizing the power of reflecting back the negative behavior of others in a calm and non-judgmental manner, and using it as a tool to disarm them, create an emotional connection, and induce them to change their behavior. This way of response is an effective and non-violent way to communicate, and it's important to reflect the behavior with a non-judgmental and calm tone, being able to create a connection rather than creating more distance or animosity. Here are some example scenarios for enacting Law 44. 1. In a business setting, a negotiator who turns the tables on an aggressive opponent by calmly and politely mirroring their demands, making them appear unreasonable. 2. In a political context, a leader who responds to an opponent's personal attack by calmly and deliberately mirroring the same attack, making the opponent appear petty and vengeful. 3. On a personal level, an individual who uses mirroring to diffuse the tension during an argument by calmly and respectfully mirroring the other person's statement, making them rethink their own position. Disarming and infuriating with the mirror effect can be a powerful way to gain an advantage by reversing the power dynamic. However, it's important to be aware that this law could also be used in an insulting and demeaning way, or that it could also be costly in terms of respect and dignity. Furthermore, it's important to use this law in a respectful and constructive way, and to be aware of the situation where it's not suitable to use it. What's the example action for Law 45? Law 45 is preach the need for change, never reform. This law advises to create a sense of urgency and necessity for change, without getting bogged down in the specifics of how that change should be implemented. Actions that align with this law could include 1. Creating a sense of urgency and necessity for change. 2. Focusing on the end goal, rather than the details of how that change should be implemented. 3. Using dramatic language and storytelling to create an emotional connection. 4. Being able to create a sense of momentum and excitement around the idea of change. 5. Being able to inspire others to join the cause and support the change. 6. Being able to adapt one's message to different audiences. 7. Being able to communicate the benefits and the vision of the change. By preaching the need for change, rather than getting bogged down in the specifics of how that change should be implemented, one can create a sense of urgency and excitement around the idea of change, and inspire others to join the cause. This approach can be a powerful tool to generate support for a cause and achieve change. It's worth noting that this law isn't about being vague or imprecise. It's about recognizing the power of creating a sense of urgency and necessity for change and using it as a tool to inspire others. It's important to be aware that this approach should be used in combination with a clear and compelling vision of the change, the benefits and the end goal. The key is to create a sense of excitement and momentum, and inspire others to join the cause and help make it happen. Here are some example scenarios for enacting Law 45. 1. In a business setting, a CEO who focuses on communicating the need for a major change in the company's strategy, rather than proposing specific plans or reforms. 2. In a political context, a leader who emphasizes the need for change and progress in society, rather than proposing specific policies or reforms. 3. On a personal level, an individual who focuses on convincing a group of friends or family members of the need for change in their relationship dynamics, rather than proposing specific solutions or reforms. Preaching the need for change can be a powerful way to create momentum and support for making changes. However, it's important to be aware that this law could also be used to avoid providing real solutions or to create a sense of urgency without good reason. Additionally, it's important to be aware that this law could also lead to confusion and a lack of direction, or that it could also be costly in terms of credibility. Furthermore, it's important to provide a clear vision and specific goals for change, in order to create a sense of direction and to create a roadmap for achieving it. What's the example action for Law 46? Law 46 is never appear too perfect. This law advises not to be too perfect or above reproach, as it can make others feel inadequate or resentful, and lead to attempts to bring one down. Actions that align with this law could include: 1. Being able to show vulnerability and flaws. 2. Being able to acknowledge mistakes and take responsibility for them. 3. Being able to share your personal struggles. 4. Being able to demonstrate that you are human like others. 5. Being able to foster an environment of mutual respect and understanding. 6. Being able to avoid appearing arrogant or superior. 7. Being able to cultivate a sense of humility. By not appearing too perfect, one can avoid making others feel inadequate or resentful and avoid the potential for attempts to bring one down. This approach can help to foster an environment of mutual respect and understanding, and to avoid appearing arrogant or superior. It's worth noting that this law isn't about being dishonest or inauthentic. It's about recognizing the importance of showing vulnerability and flaws, acknowledging mistakes and taking responsibility for them. By showing your personal struggles, you can humanize yourself, and make it easier for others to connect with you. Being humble and grounded is important. It helps to avoid creating an environment of mistrust or resentment. The key is to be authentic, honest and humble. Here are some example scenarios for enacting Law 46. 1. In a business setting, a manager who deliberately makes small mistakes or shows vulnerability to gain the trust and respect of their employees. 2. In a political context, a leader who is open about their past mistakes or shortcomings, to gain the empathy and support of voters. 3. On a personal level, an individual who downplays their achievements or accomplishments in order to avoid alienating others or appearing arrogant. Never appearing too perfect can be a powerful way to build trust and empathy with others. However, it's important to be aware that this law could also be used to manipulate others or to hide one's true nature and intentions. Additionally, it's important to be aware that this law could also lead to a lack of confidence, or that it could also be costly in terms of authenticity. Furthermore, it's important to find the balance between being authentic and appearing too perfect, in order to gain the trust of others while maintaining the respect. What's the example action for Law 47? Law 47 is never appear too good. This law advises not to be too virtuous or morally superior, as it can make others feel inadequate or resentful, and lead to attempts to bring one down. Actions that align with this law could include: 1. Being able to show that you are not perfect, you have a moral code, but still fallible. 2. Being able to acknowledge moral gray areas. 3. Being able to admit that you don't have all the answers. 4. Being able to express empathy for others' weaknesses. 5. Being able to avoid being judgmental or overly critical of others. 6. Being able to avoid appearing as if you are always right. 7. Being able to cultivate a sense of humility and understanding. By not appearing too good, one can avoid making others feel inadequate or resentful and avoid the potential for attempts to bring one down. This approach can help to foster an environment of mutual respect and understanding, and to avoid appearing judgmental or superior. It's worth noting that this law isn't about being morally flexible. It's about recognizing the importance of being aware of moral gray areas and showing that one is not always right. By being humble, understanding, and acknowledging that one is fallible, one can foster trust, humility and empathy. The key is to be aware of one's own limitations and show empathy to others, and not to come across as arrogant or judgmental. Here are some example scenarios for enacting Law 47. 1. In a business setting, a company that stops its expansion plans once it has achieved a certain level of market dominance, to avoid alienating customers or regulators. 2. In a political context, a leader who stops pushing for further policy changes once they've achieved significant progress, to avoid alienating supporters or inciting resistance. 3. On a personal level, an individual who stops pursuing a relationship or career advancement once they've achieved their desired level of success, to avoid becoming too invested or burning bridges. Not going past the mark you aimed for can be a powerful way to gain stability and longevity in a win. However, it's important to be aware that this law could also be used to give up too soon or to stop growing. Additionally, it's important to be aware that this law could also lead to complacency, or that it could be also costly in terms of potential opportunities. Furthermore, it's important to find the balance between achieving the aim and not going too far, in order to gain a win that is sustainable in the long run. What's the example action for Law 48? Law 48 is assume formlessness. This law advises to be adaptable, flexible and to avoid committing to a fixed identity or position, as it makes one vulnerable to being outmaneuvered. Actions that align with this law could include: 1. Being able to be adaptable, changeable and flexible. 2. Being able to avoid committing to a fixed identity or position. 3. Being able to be aware of the situation and respond accordingly. 4. Being able to avoid becoming overly attached to an idea or a position. 5. Being able to avoid becoming predictable or easy to outmaneuver. 6. Being able to be aware of the ever-changing nature of things. 7. Being able to cultivate a sense of formlessness, to be able to change shape to match the circumstances. By assuming formlessness, one can avoid becoming vulnerable to being outmaneuvered. By being adaptable, flexible and not committing to a fixed identity or position, this approach can help to keep one's options open, and to be responsive to the situation as it evolves. It's worth noting that this law isn't about being wishy-washy or indecisive. It's about recognizing the importance of being adaptable, flexible, and not becoming overly attached to an idea or position. The key is to be aware of the ever-changing nature of things, be able to respond accordingly, to be able to adapt, change shape to match the circumstances and not get stuck in the preconceptions. By being flexible and adaptable, one can make strategic decisions and outmaneuver opponents. Here are some example scenarios for enacting Law 48. 1. In a business setting, a company that frequently rebrands and adapts its product line to stay ahead of the competition and keep its customers interested. 2. In a political context, a leader who avoids taking a rigid stance on issues and instead adapts their position to the changing times and circumstances. 3. On a personal level, an individual who avoids becoming too entrenched in their beliefs or habits, instead choosing to continuously learn and evolve. Assume formlessness can be a powerful way to remain adaptable and in control. However, It's important to be aware that this law could also be used to be dishonest or to avoid taking responsibility. Additionally, it's important to be aware that this law could also lead to lack of identity or direction, or that it could also be costly in terms of authenticity. Furthermore, it's important to strike a balance between being adaptable and remaining true to oneself. Conclusion. Overall, the 48 Laws of Power gives readers an understanding of how people can influence, control and make the best use of the power around them. However, it should be used with caution as it can be seen as amoral and could be used to manipulate others. It's important to use the laws ethically and with a balanced approach, in order to achieve the intended results without causing harm.